and the pursuit of truth and common sense in an unbelievable world. You're listening to the Right Mind podcast with your host, Todd Schowalter.
Hello, everybody. I'm Todd Schowalter, and welcome to Right Mind. Today, my guest is, he has a host of his own podcast. I'd like to welcome Junya Beaubrun. The name of his podcast is Whose World Is This? And in the current state of affairs that we've been discussing on the show lately, there's a lot of division, there's a lot of stress. Junya, we're going to kind of talk about today, what are some ways that we might find a little bit of happiness? What are some ways that we might be able to eliminate some of this divisiveness and get to a more unified state? And just in your opinion, based on your podcast itself, how can we find peace of mind at this point?
Well, that's a great question, by the way. It's something that I tackle on my podcast because, I notice now more than ever in my particular lifetime. I don't know about previous lifetimes. I can only go from what I see, what I read. But from right now, I notice that everyone has decided that we are going to eliminate nuance out of our conversations. So it's pick a side or else.
Okay. So divisiveness. When you say nuance, do you mean explain that a little bit more?
Okay. Well, let's take for a moment, to jab or not to jab.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Right.
If you are someone who is maybe vaccine hesitant, you're automatically labeled a Trumper or a January 6er or something else, or you're selfish or something along those lines. So it doesn't give room for someone who's saying, hey, listen, I may be looking for more information. I'm being hesitant for my own personal or religious reasons. I've never been vaccinated before. This is a stance that I have taken all through my life. So it doesn't leave room, I noticed, in some of the public and popular discourse for that conversation to be had. There have been plenty of people in this country over the last 34 years that have been either anti-vax or vaccine hesitant, and it now seems more than ever that those people are the ones that are being vilified. And on the other side, sometimes the people who are all for vaxxers and things of that nature, they get, treated a certain way as well, not giving room to have a middle ground kind of conversation.
Right. And, one of the things that I've seen, and it's interesting you bring up the vaccine because it's obviously a very big topic of division. I'll be forefront. I have not gotten the vaccine. And as you say, I've been, just outright criticized, put down by not only outsiders, but by friends and family. And I have my own reasons. I actually had COVID. Okay. I believe and it wasn't a big deal for me, fortunately. I believe I have the antibodies. And I feel safe. Also, I'm not adverse to other vaccines. Back in the day, whether chicken pox, you name it, have all those. This
Right.
is a relatively new vaccine. Okay. And here's what I take away from a lot of this, because we get to the division aspect of it. The media, and whether we're talking the vaccine, whether we're talking politics, it seems that they're just feeding on this division frenzy to almost like a sporting event, make sides for ratings, and we're the ones in the middle of it.
Well, the thing is, we have to take some responsibility for the media that we have. We don't live in North Korea.
Right.
We have to take responsibility. I used to work in marketing and I used to work in advertising in New York City. That's where I'm from, born and raised in New York City. And I worked in various industries that were affiliated with marketing. And guess what? Bad news travels faster than good news. People are more willing to speak out loud about a bad experience that they've had than oftentimes a good experience that they've had. So oftentimes when we were representing a client, whether it be a restaurant or some other kind of business, whether it was service oriented as such, we had to make sure that we kept the good, the positive reviews up. Why? Because bad news spreads. So that if it bleeds, it leads media.
Exactly.
We may have to take a little bit of responsibility for how we are provoked by negative stimuli. We may have to, because it seems as if we feed on a lot of negativity. It provokes something in us, it gives us a chemical reaction, and then we go out there into the world, and then we espouse or parrot, and react to said negative stimuli. I mean, I feel as of right now, our media, in the mainstream sense of the word, because we are media as well.
Right.
Okay, we count. Our mainstream corporate-based media, such as it is, I feel has rendered itself useless to being a viable tool to illuminate the American public.
Oh, I totally agree.
Go
ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, please.
I was going to say on several of the my earlier shows, we've covered a variety of topics, whether it's the politics, whether it's what candidates you vote for, critical race theory, a variety of different topics. And here's the bottom line to it all: not almost every guest, okay, on every topic, even though we may be on, and I try to find the common sense in things. That's the point of my whole show. But every guest, whether we agreed or not, all agreed that we just want to get along. I mean, you can believe what you want. I can believe what I want, but we can still coexist. We can still do what we need to do to live as human beings in society. Now, you've got the media, but that doesn't sell. As you said, if it doesn't bleed, it doesn't lead. And you have the media that have decided, well, let's add some let's make it spicier. Let's have some teams, X against Y, and let's make it brutal and terrible, because now we're going to have viewers, now we're going to have listeners, and that is wrong. I mean, I have a journalism degree, and I am embarrassed by where the state of journalism has gone, from objectivity and telling the news to subjectivity to telling me opinions and dividing people. And you have this brainwashed culture, in my opinion, that just feed upon it like a sponge, and they believe anything these talking heads owned by corporations are telling them. And who are the people that suffer? People like you and I, your family, my family, when we all just want to get along.
So here's the thing. Here's what's important to realize as well. When you say media, I don't care if you're a Foxer, a CNNer, an MSNBCer, an Al Jazeera, their bills are being paid by whom? How does a mainstream network stay on the air?
On advertising.
How do they pay the rent? They pay the rent, and they pay the 7 to 8 figure salaries of those talking heads by corporations.
Exactly.
Commercials in between the diatribes is what pays the bills. Now, those corporations want a return on their investment. And truth be told, they could care less what you say to get the ratings, as long as you get those ratings and don't talk about the advertiser. That's another thing. Your advertiser could be the most corrupt criminal actor on the planet, but you're not going to speak about them. You're going to find a little way. Let's take mainstream. I don't want to get into much in that, but I would take one of the mainstream networks. They've decided that even though Donald Trump has not been in office for how many months,
right,
the most of the ratings that they get are from talking and speaking about Donald Trump. Still, this man doesn't have a social media account. He's not in the public eye as such, not like that. He is not our president at the moment, and yet their biggest ratings, their largest viewership is when they're lambasting the former president. So as many things that are going on in our society today that need to be addressed, I don't think speaking about a former president is first and foremost.
So, no, it comes down to smoke and mirrors. I mean, in addition to journalism, I used to do magic shows when I was younger. And the first thing you want to do, I want you to look here so you don't see what I'm doing over here. Okay. Absolutely. And it's all smoke and mirrors. And what the media, in my opinion, is doing, and we're buying into it, I'm not. I mean, I've got a lot of flaws, but I won't buy into that one.
Right.
Is basically they're saying we have so many problems right now. But we don't want you to look at that. Let's bring up something totally unrelated that you may focus on. Hey, remember what he did back then? Meanwhile, you're not looking at all the junk that's happening right now. And again, we're the ones that suffer for that, and we buy into it.
Well,
I don't buy into it.
there's an old African proverb that when elephants collide, when giants collide, it's the grass that suffers.
Yeah.
And so right now we are the grass and we suffer under these conditions. So when you speak about how to create a happier space, even on my podcast, I speak about the dinner table is coming, Thanksgiving is coming, Christmas is coming, New Year's is coming. We're into the holiday season where you have children, adult children who are married, who don't want to hang out with their parents and don't want to sit at the same dinner table as their parents because of political differences. The same as parents not wanting to sit with their children. You have a parent saying, I'm not sitting at the same table as that in-law or as that cousin because they haven't been such and such, or they voted for such and such. This is what's going on now. So the community that we're supposed to be counting on the most, which is our relatives, our family, people that live next door to us, people that live across the street from us, people that live above us, below us. We are actually dividing ourselves from those people, and we're buying into predominant narratives instead, as opposed to saying, you know what? I don't have to agree with you to love you. I don't have to agree with you to sit at the same table with you. You are my family. When worse comes to absolute worst, it's you and I that are going to have to find a way to figure it out. When I need a loan, when I'm sick, if I'm infirm, if there's an emergency, when I put down my emergency contact, I don't put down Fox or CNN.
Right.
Not going to be Mr. Hannity or Mr. Anderson Cooper or Don Lemon or Rachel Maddow or NPR or whomever else. That's not who you're putting down on your emergency contacts. The people you count on the most, we are going to have to find ways to find common accords. How do we do that is the question. How do we do that?
Well,
I
that's
have
just it.
friends
That's
of
just it.
mine
How do
who,
we do it? And the problem, I think, now, more than any other culture, so to speak, we just came off a period of time where we basically were told what to do. You couldn't leave your house. You couldn't do, you couldn't go to work. You couldn't do all these other things. And that forced a lot of people to sit in front of the television and absorb this crap, and soak it up and decide what they were going to believe and what they weren't going to believe. And like you said, okay, I have family members, I have friends, I have people that, social media, unfriend me, people that don't want to talk to me anymore on the phone. It is so ridiculous. It is so, why? For all I care, you, my friends, anyway, you can believe the earth is flat. You can believe gravity doesn't exist. You could believe, whatever, the Cubs are the best baseball team of all time. I don't care. Okay.
go
But you
Yankees.
still, well, there you go. Go Yankees. All right. But I don't, at the end of the day, look, I like you as a person. I respect what you think. I don't agree with you, but hey, we're friends. We're family. That's what it, and now you have this divisive situation where you can't even talk. You can't even coexist.
Well, what we have is a force multiplier when it comes to defying logic. We know that. You have your fight or flight syndrome. So if you introduce fear into a situation, if you introduce ignorance as well as fear into a situation, what you're going to lack at that moment is reasoning. You're going to lack reasoning. You're going to abandon reasoning for your fears. What we've been going through over the last 18 months is just a continuum of what was going on. Even I can date it back to even when George Bush was elected in 2000, 2001. Many people thought that election needed to be reviewed. And there was some on one side that said one thing, some on the other side. Then we had September 11th right after. We had the wars right after. We had elevated color schemes on our screens. Do you remember this time?
Oh, yes.
And it was telling you, we had the Skittles colors on the screen telling us, oh, it may not be, there's a threat level has been elevated. And so I don't know if you realize this, but we've been living under a threat matrix over the last 20 years.
Oh, yeah.
People may not think about it in that sense, but we've been living under, we had a divisive presidency in 2000, we had September 11th, we had the wars in Afghanistan, we had the re-election, we had, then all of a sudden Obama came in 2008, That was extremely divisive, created a new movement. We had tea parties, we had things, we had alt-rights, off-rights, right. So you went so right, you went upside down, and the
Right.
left didn't know what to do with themselves. And then all of a sudden, Obama, with respect to people who voted for Obama, he abandoned his core. They became extremely embittered, but they still supported him. And so we've been going through this. We had the economic collapse in 07, 07, 08, 09, 10. People haven't been made whole from that yet.
Right.
Many people
Right.
haven't even recovered from that. So if you look at what's going on now, we're part of a continuum. This 18 months isn't in a vacuum. It's not in a bubble, but it heightened now we've politicized a virus.
Oh,
we've
yeah.
politicized the sickness. We've politicized getting vaccinated, but we've been politicizing so many things over the last, I would say, 15 to 20 years. So this is what's got us here. And everyone being home, like you said, everyone getting data, so they believe. And what we have now is a centralized information system. I remember growing up in New York. I grew up in Queens, New York.
Mm-hmm.
It was easy for me to get a pamphlet.
A pamphlet?
A self-published book on the street.
Right, right.
Guys were selling books and oils and whatever, and you bought the book, and then you would go and talk to that guy. Sometimes I would be given books. I would say, I was like 13 years old. I don't have the money. They're like, you know what, little guy? Take the book home, read it, tell me what you think, and we'll have a discussion about it.
Okay.
And now this guy who's just selling oils and candles and books, he and I are having a long-winded discussion. I'm 13, 14, 15 years old in front of some book stand in the middle of the street in Jamaica Avenue. We don't have pamphlets. We don't have books. We're not reading books. All of our information is centralized right now. Everyone is now going to the same exact places to get the same exact information. That's why these forums that we have are extremely important. If you watch mainstream news right now, there's a 1.5 minute newscast about something that's so important to our lives. You're pretty much dedicating a minute and a half, which is half the time of your average bad pop song, to tell me something that has so much context and subtext to it. Obviously, you're not going to get into all of that. You're just trying to find a way to get me to pick a side right now, give me some quick talking points, something that's going to provoke me. People are going to take that little tidbit of a situation and run with it.
Oh, exactly. Meanwhile, and that comes down to, again, the corruption of the media. And what I truly believe, and I see it becoming more and more relevant every single day. What happens, June, if like all of us do come together, all of us do unite, and we're not fighting anymore, and we're all thinking for ourselves like normal human beings were built to do, and we're a one again, and we're not divided. You know what happens then? There's no control. Once you have divided, whether it's cultures, whether it's whatever, even family, whatever, but when you have that division, you need control. And what happens now, once control has to be implemented, who's going to do it? Okay? Who's going to be in charge of that control? And whoever has that control wins the game. Okay? Once we realize that we are being controlled ourselves, and we realize this is a sick game going on, then and only then might we finally wake up from this bad dream and see the emperor really doesn't have any clothes and come together. But the media, like I said before, that I have a degree in and worked in, and I'm so embarrassed to even use the word journalism at all at this point, are the ones, because they are, like you said, they're owned by corporations, they're owned by people telling them what to do, are the mouthpieces that are dividing this country for a benefit that they're being paid for by another outside source. And it's wrong. It's wrong.
I'll push back on that a bit, because before there was media, we had a divided America.
Okay, explain that.
Well, you look at me and look at you.
Sure.
At one point in time in this country, maybe half a century ago, it'd be very difficult for you and I to have this conversation.
Well,
the very same places that I'm hanging out in Oklahoma right now, 50 years ago, it'd be very difficult for me to hang out in those places.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I understand. Sure.
So, you go back 100 years, and I probably wouldn't even be able to leave certain places without having someone who didn't look like me give me permission to go in. I would need a permission slip to go into certain places. So
Okay.
before we had mainstream media, before we had corporations such as they are today, part of our modern lexicon, we had divisions. We were a divided America. So there's a conversation that could be had that we have to heal before we can unite, because there are certain narratives that certain people will push back on and say, like I just did just now, and say, well, you know, we've not been a united America. There have been many Americas. There's been America for one group. There's been two Americas for another one, and another one can have another conversation. You get what I'm saying? There are many different conversations that can be had. I feel that those conversations can't be had in vacuums as in the multimedia or in the mainstream media sphere that they're being had. The only way to have those conversations is to have long-winded conversations like you and I are having.
Okay, exactly.
30-minute, 60-minute, 1 hour and 30-minute, 2 hour, 120-minute conversations where we can all get our say, as opposed to when I watch the television, I look at it and I go, this is the director's cut. And what does a director do with their camera lens? They emphasize what they want to emphasize centrally, and then they put other things on the periphery.
Absolutely. And so a good editor helps too.
And that's where a good editor helps as well. So when I'm watching television and I'm watching it with my fiance, I'm watching it and I tell her and I turn to the side and I go, you see that right there? That was a little sleight of hand. They did a little Tarantino right there in the media, because what the story really is such and such and such and such. But I understand what their purpose is. Their purpose is to maintain a division that already existed, because God forbid June and Todd are having a conversation, and June can believe what he believes and Todd can believe in what he believes, but we also believe in each other's right to be able to say it, to be,
and be friends, and also be friends.
And be friends and say, hey, listen, we have common enemies, and the friend of mine, you know what I mean? The enemy of mine, you already know what it is. So I can say we both have a common issue. Our common issue is we don't like the way, how we're being told what to do, how to live, where to live. We don't like our government control. We don't like our corporations controlling the media to the extent that they do. We would like to disband the fact that only a handful of companies own all the media, whether it be in radio or television or print media. That's a problem. We have a monopoly that needs to be broken up, because a conversation like this, with all due respect to our mediums and, you know, podcast platforms that we're using, this is a conversation for radio. Yes. You and I both should be getting paid serious bucks to have these conversations. We're educated enough, we're eloquent and articulate enough, we're able to hold opposing ideas and balance ideas to the degree that we can. We deserve to get a lot, as much as everyone else is getting. So one of the main conversations is, how do you break that up? How do you make that part of the conversation when you're going to vote for your next councilman, your next mayor, your next governor, your next senator, and say, what are we doing about this whole monopoly right now? Because all we have is this predominant narrative that all of you guys get to parrot and call it the truth.
That's
but
right.
Yet, there's so many other perspectives that need to be introduced for us to make an informed decision that you're not introducing, because you guys have decided behind closed doors in a monopolistic fashion, this is the narrative and this is what it's going to be. Meanwhile,
Right, and that's just it. And it gets to the point, June, where it's we're not even talking journalism or news anymore. We're talking outright propaganda. I mean, we're talking, you know, basically this is the voice, this is the message that a certain group, a certain company wants you to believe, a certain, you know, whatever faction they may be. And unfortunately, platforms like ours are actually being censored. They're being shut down. This particular show, or this episode rather, but I've had other shows where, like, if I talked about certain things, whether it's the vaccine or whatnot, that YouTube won't want to run it They just won't read it. Not because it's wrong, but just because it doesn't go along with the narrative.
With the
And,
prevailing narrative.
when you're not going along with it, how does the narrative? Here's the thing. I mean, if there's something going, if there's a wild tiger running around my neighborhood, okay, I want the news to tell me, hey, Todd, be careful. There's a wild tiger out there. I don't want them to tell me, well, there's a feline that may be dangerous, but he may be gentle too. Oh, look at the beautiful colors on him. And meanwhile, I'm getting mauled. I want to know what's going on. I want to know the truth. I want to know, is this an apple? Is this an orange? I don't want anybody's opinion on
I
it.
mean, well, let's think about it this way. Regardless if you believe in their politics or not, doesn't matter. PBS 40, 50 years ago, let's say 50 years ago, PBS would have Malcolm X on.
Sure.
PBS would have Noam Chomsky. PBS would have James Baldwin. And you can have a long-winded discussion and interview as to why they think the way they think. Right now, it's almost an impossibility to have those kind of people on your public broadcasting station right now having long-winded conversations.
Oh, without protest and everything else. I know.
Well, even besides protest, the mere fact that most of our public broadcasting media is not really being funded by public broadcasting.
That's an excellent point, and that comes right back to it. Right.
So PBS, which was something I grew up on, is not the same PBS I'm looking at today. My mom wouldn't even let me watch other networks when I was a kid.
Absolutely.
Watching PBS, and that's it. If she was in the kitchen and she heard commercials, she'd run and go, "What are you watching?" No.
No, I know. Your audio's cutting out just a little bit, June.
Sorry.
There we go. Let's try it. Well, actually, no, I agree totally. I mean, in PBS, I mean, Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers, all those. So we all grew up on them. And even now, it seems like whether you like it or not, they seem to be pushing a narrative on our kids. Why can't we just, again, I mean, we're down to our last couple of minutes, and just to wrap things up a little bit, I mean, what we came to the table with today is, how can we kind of break through that? How can we all get along? And I think sometimes, as you mentioned earlier, I think before we can fix the problem, we have to actually see that there is a problem in the first place. And a lot of people, in my opinion, just don't see the problem. They just go ahead and watch it. Oh, CNN, there. Oh, Fox, there it is. Whatever he said, whoever this says is true.
The first things first is I have to look at let's say, for example, I may have a sister-in-law who I am diametrically opposed to, and she may approach her politics with religious fervor. I personally don't. I reach for higher truths. For me, I studied politics. I got a degree in government and international studies. I'm all for the sport of debate. People get more emotionally attached to their politics than I do. If you read politics and you go back 1,000 years, you'll realize that we're all on a continuum and sometimes in a cycle. So I understand it from that perspective, that I don't look at particular events in a vacuum. I look at it as a continuum. So because I do that, I'm able to see things differently and I'm able to keep it balanced. But many, many people that are around me may look at me and go, June, I don't want to talk to June because because I may take the emotion out and look at it clinically. I'm asking people out there,
with common sense, logic.
Our holiday season is coming and it's family first.
Exactly.
Respect the opinions of your family and the people that are going to be with you when times get rough and times get hard. You don't have to agree. You can agree to disagree. That is the key to being an adult, and it's the key oftentimes to being an intellectual. If you want to become truly intelligent and intellectual, you have to be able to hold opposing opinions in your hand and balance them and say, okay, I may not agree with that, but I can see the sense in it, or I can see why someone may or would agree with that particular perspective. It's very, very important that we get there, because right now, as Mark Zuckerberg is creating metaverses, and everyone wants us to be in this centralized intelligence systems where we're just looking at them for all of our information. They're telling us they don't want to think for ourselves. They don't want us to have these conversations. They want to tell us what the narrative is. And then we go out there and fight for it. I think Ezra Pound once said, and I'm going to butcher the quote, but he said, tyranny really means taking two lies, giving it to the public, and have them fight over what the truth is.
Couldn't be better said. No, even if that's not exactly it, you did a great job with it. I see exactly what you mean, and that's a shame that
So
we can't do that. Can't. I mean,
this is important. That's why these conversations, I don't have to agree. I don't, agreeing is not a prerequisite for conversation and alliances on
right.
everything. I don't have to,
Exactly.
I don't, you may, I love my mom and dad. I don't agree with everything they did. I love my brother. I didn't agree with everything he did, or he doesn't agree with everything I did. Since when did this 100% approval of every single last ideology, statement, and action be a prerequisite and a qualification for us to talk to each other, for us to respect each other? Since when? Because show me the person that you agree with 100%, and I'll be like, you don't know that person as well as you think.
No, absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly right. And again, I think it comes down to division, the control aspect, because they want us divided. They want us
Well,
divided. That sells. That's
a,
what keeps the
you
narrative
know
going.
what, Todd? A warden loves gangs.
Yeah.
A
Okay.
warden loves prison gangs. Why? Because if they're fighting with each other, then you're going to forget that they're in prison, and we're the ones holding the batons, and we're the ones holding the keys to the jail cell.
And you have the control. You have the control.
You
Just
have the
like
control.
just like.
Warden loves prison gangs, so they love us in gangs. They love it.
Great final note. That's yeah, that's definitely that hits it home. Well, June, we got to wrap this one up. Unfortunately, the show's only half an hour, but we will
All good.
continue. I would definitely like to have you back, and I also encourage everybody to listen to June's podcast. Whose World Is This? We'll have it up on the.
Whose World Is This with Junya Rene Beaubrun? Got to say the whole thing.
I'm sorry. Whose World Is This with Junya Rene Beaubrun? Okay, and I will have that on the screen so everybody can to find it and have links and all that good stuff as well. Because I've listened to your show. It's very well done. It's very very thought provoking. That's why I couldn't wait to have you on the show, and that's why I'm looking forward to having you back again, because we could talk about this all day, all week, all month, and I still don't think we get to the bottom of it. But like you said, I think if we can finally break out of that central tunnel vision, mainstream media mindset that people have, maybe we might make a little bit of progress.
Absolutely.
Okay, my friend, I want to thank you very much for being on the show. And I want to thank everybody for listening and watching today. I'm Todd Schowalter, and thanks for listening and watching Right Mind. And remember, if you don't have a right mind, you don't have a mind at all. Till next time, bye-bye.
This has been the Right Mind Podcast with Todd Schowalter.